Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the City Council study session. First agenda item. This evening we are without Mayor Pro Tem Gillett. He did contact me in advance suggesting he couldn't make tonight's meeting. Our first agenda item is the financial report. Director of Finance and Administrative Services, Kathleen Wrinkle, is present to discuss the September 2016 financial report. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm happy to report another non-eventful type of month. We had all the financials come in pretty much the way we expected them to. If at this point we are still forecasting that we will be about 102,000 better than the expected year-end projection. So that gives us a little wiggle room. Again, not much. This is down, like I said last month, from the July 131,000. So the large items on the front that I'd like to walk through really quickly of the very first page of the financials is the transfer and encumbrances, because you'll see some fairly large numbers there, negative numbers. The detail for the general fund transfers and encumbrances is all transfers, and they are on page 4. If you'd like to see the detail, 1.2 million of it is the transfer that goes to the Public Improvement Fund, and 0.8 million of it is to the EMRF road construction costs. For the special revenue funds, debt service fund, and capital projects fund below that, the negative numbers are encumbrances. Those are POs that are in process but not yet paid. And to the far right of the multi-year capital project fund section, you will see that there is a 290, almost 300 million, or excuse me, 300,000. Working too many large numbers here. 300,000 that's negative. That will be covered by a pending transfer from the Public Improvement Fund. A question that often comes up is down towards the bottom of the page, the employee benefits. You'll see in the far right ending balance column a $300,000 negative number. That is a month in arrears, and what happens there is that we pay the vendor for the health services, and then we collect the rest of the funds from the employees over the next month's paychecks. So it does balance, and at the end of the year we'll accrue, and it'll come out negative or positive or zero, real close. Okay. There was nothing exciting. We are 3/4 of the way through the year. We have a little more than 3/4 of the revenue collected, 79%. And on the expenditure side, we've only expended 74%. The general fund balance on page 5, the 2016 estimate has not changed, and we are at 16.9%, which is a little bit better than our general fund policy. The other item of note is on page 8. Can't count anymore either. The sales and use tax collections, again, area 7 has dropped a little bit lower than what we collected prior year, and so that was a $42,000 drop from September. But you'll remember from August there was an increase of $92,000. We believe we've kind of stabilized at almost 9% below what we've collected last year. Again, this is the telecommunications and information technology purchases appears to be from outside of the area that is brought in. So those are a little unpredictable. Area 1 has come in a little better than we expected. And so that's helping us out by about $112,000. Pretty much all we have for the financials that are of note. Any questions?
Seeing none, thank you so much. Moving on to our second agenda item, if nobody's got any questions or comments, is Dry Gulch drainage discussion. Public Works Director Dave Henderson is present to discuss the Dry Gulch drainage. Good evening, Mr. Henderson.
Evening. Well, Paul Weller and I are here tonight to give you an update of the Dry Gulch study. It's been some time since we've been here, so I'll give you a short update on the history, and Paul will go through a PowerPoint and give you where we are today and how we're going to go forward. Y'all may recall in 2015 we had a number of residents show up complaining about flooding in northeast Englewood. And the timing was good because Denver and Urban Drainage and Flood Control District were doing a study of Harvard Gulch, and our dry gulch goes to Harvard Gulch. So we joined that study, and Council approved an IGA in August of 2015. Subsequent to that, we had an open house where we presented alternatives. And really the alternative selected was a no-brainer. It was the one that pipes it within existing right-of-ways and doesn't take any properties.
I think it might be helpful to pull the microphone.
So sorry. All right, here we go. So I'll repeat that we selected an alternative that doesn't require taking of any properties. Is this mic on?
Yeah, you're good.
I don't know.
You're good. You have to pull it closer.
Okay. And council we let council know that we were going to go forward with that alternative or recommend it to Urban Drainage. They've hired matrix design consultants to do all the engineering on these studies, and basically the alternative selected was about a $24 million project. That was the initial estimate. I think that's gone down, and Paul will go through that. Anyway, the completion has been pushed back. We kind of expected to be with you months ago, but it's been pushed back. Denver has been reviewing it. They have various departments with a whole bunch of different interests, which delayed it a little bit. And the Corps of Engineers is also doing a study of Harvard Gulch, and they needed to catch up. It took them just a little bit longer. So here we are today. Paul will go through this PowerPoint, and we'll talk about where we are today.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The two studies that Urban Drainage is conducting is a master plan, which looks at the 100-year flooding and the means to convey that flooding, and then a flood hazard area delineation, or FAD. That is the technical term for how the floodplain is actually defined. The proposed floodplain affects 136 homes, about 284 properties. This was based on the previous estimate. I haven't been informed by Urban Drainage if that has gone up or gone down. So I think it's still about the same. The proposed floodplain designation is important because it affects people's property values. It affects what they can do or can't do with their property. And it's going to result in additional costs for the owners for insurance and flood proofing. The master plan will provide a solution for the elimination of the floodplain. In other words, we're going to put all the water in the pipe, and the floodplain designation on the properties can be removed. And would any requirement for any flood insurance. What we are proposing tonight is that we hold a public meeting prior to the end of the year to inform the homeowners and the residents of this floodplain designation, and would like to start looking at minor areas that we can make improvements that may help, and I emphasize may because the proposed storms are so much larger than what our infrastructure can currently handle. We may help some things in the short term. So by the end of my discussion this evening, I'd like to get your approval on our approach and suggestions of any other topics that you would like us to look into as we go forward. The current status of the program, the flood hazard area delineation, is expected to be completed this month. Urban Drainage recently returned some comments back to the consultant. The FAD will be included in a physical map revision, or PMR, request that Urban Drainage will submit to Fema at the end of the year. Inglewood's portion will be included in that with your approval. The master plan that designates the improvements that are to be made are going in front of the Urban Drainage Board in November of 2016. And as Dave mentioned, the project has been drawn out by a concurrent study by the Army Corps of Engineers. Wanted to go over a few pros and cons with you of what a FEMA floodplain designation would mean. The floodplain designation will identify the risk for homeowners. It'll make flood insurance available to them, and it will provide a notification to future owners. Currently, owners are pretty much on their own to whether to, if they know they're in the floodplain, or if they want to tell a proposed buyer that there's a potential for some flooding. It'll also make the federal funding available for some of the storm sewer improvements beyond which urban drainage will provide. Those federal funds will be supported by urban drainage, and the city will maintain the community rating system, or CRS status. That's a program that FEMA uses to set flood insurance rate. Our program was recently audited by FEMA, and we maintained our rating of 7 out of 10 on that. So there may be some work we can do on that to bring that rating up a little bit. But again, we're just kind of scratching the surface, and so there's more work to be done there. The cons of having a FEMA floodplain designation is it's going to increase the cost to the owners for flood insurance, flood proofing, and it may affect the ability of some owners to pay for that. And of course, it's going to generate negative public sentiment for the insurance requirements. And then again, it's going to restrict what people can do on their property. The physical map revision that I alluded to before is a request that urban drainage provides to FEMA to include the flood area in the National Flood Insurance Program. It's a federal review, so there's federal regulations and federal time schedules on that. So there's an 6-month to a 2-year review queuing period by FEMA before they even pick it up to look at it. Once they do start, then they have an 18-month process. So it's kind of a long and involved process that we're looking at there. And there's some question, at least in my mind, about when is flood insurance going to be available to the residents. And during that program, there's new requirements that are being developed by FEMA on public notification, and those are going to include mailings and public meetings. Once the process has gone through all that, FEMA will then issue the amendments to the flood insurance rate maps. The other direction that the city could go is not to include the FAD in the submittal to FEMA, but instead submit it to the Colorado Water Conservation Board. That would be more of a local control. They're the same requirements as the FEMA submittal, so the work that's already been done by Matrix could be submitted, and then it would allow for the ability for the city to regulate the floodplain. And then the link there is the full rules and regulations. This, of course, would, again, eliminate the possibility, or may restrict the ability to get some federal funds and flood insurance. Going forward, again, what we'd like to do is we'd like to conduct a public meeting with the affected residents to present the master plan and the FAD to them. The meeting will be attended by urban drainage, Matrix Design, and FEMA flood insurance representatives that can really do a better job about answering some questions. And we'll be reviewing how the properties will be affected with and without the FEMA floodplain regulation. We also want to provide resources for the owners. The first link to the FEMA website is kind of their general website. There's a lot of information on there. If you're interested, spend some time on it. I was a little overwhelmed with it, so it'll probably take some work getting through all that. But we also want to provide them with links to flood insurance and flood proofing, things that they can do. There are flood warning systems that we want to make them and the affected properties aware of. Urban Drainage and Flood Control District maintains gauges on Harvard Gulch, and they have that you can look and see what it's doing. They have a Twitter account that they issue alerts for. And then there's also a flash flood prediction program, F2P2, that they issue to local governments. So we would incorporate that into our emergency management system, and maybe come up possibly a reverse 911 notification or something like that. And then we'll provide these links to the important sites on the Public Works website and kind of come up with a dry gulch drainage resource. And what we want to get out of these meetings is more information on how the residents would like to proceed, or what their cares and concerns are. The next step of our plan would like to formulate local plans that we can look at some of these smaller areas and see if we can help. Some of the ones that I've identified in the last couple of years are Dartmouth Downing and Corona Cornell. The photograph here is an inlet that's half in the backyard and half in the alley of 2970 South Ogden. We'd like to move that inlet out into the alley, put a concrete apron around it so it's a little easier for us to maintain. Right now, you can see this was taken after the recent flood there in mid-July. Watermark is up half a foot or a foot above the grate, and it was completely plugged just because of the location that it was. So where we can, would like to coordinate these improvements with the conceptual design of the 100-year pipe, come up with a design and build schedule, come up with a budget and funding, and then see what we could do to get it designed and constructed. This one on Ogden here we're going to try to do in-house and do it as quickly as we can. This is the page out of the most recent master plan that Matrix has submitted. We reviewed that and submitted comments back to Urban Drainage early last week. The total estimated capital improvement cost is a little more than $19 million now. That's, as Dave indicated, that's a little less than it was. There were some issues that I had with it. Some things weren't consistent with their previous estimate, weren't consistent with the plan. And then they had a utility relocation estimate that I don't think is reasonable. They're saying all the water and sewer lines that have to be relocated for these larger pipes to go in, they're allowing $500,000. I'm thinking it's at least 1.5 to 2 times that, but I don't have any good data to really justify that. That's just kind of a gut feeling. This is the work product from the Dry Gulch Master Plan. This shows the alignment of the pipe that they are proposing and called out with the sizes of the pipe. This is the profile that they have developed showing how it will fit in the ground, and also calling out locations of where we have crossings with other utilities. And then this is the draft of the actual FAD that would be submitted to FEMA, showing the actual floodplain, floodway, cross-sections, and all the technical data. The long-range plan for the design and the construction of the pipe, first off, we'll need to have coordination with Denver because they've selected the same all-pipe alternative from Yale to Harvard Gulch. So they would need to either fund their side of it or allow us to build the pipe under Yale.
It's got the fan. It's so hot. The table's hot.
Get some other notes out.
Go low tech for a minute.
Yeah, I think we all already have this followed, so go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, we're following along. I'm
Right.
following.
So after coordination with Denver, we have to look at funding and budgeting. Urban Drainage typically pays for 50% for design and construction of the master plan drainageway improvements. And there's also pre-disaster mitigation grants available from FEMA, and the presentation has a link to that. Those are competitive grants, and there's not a lot of people here in Denver that have experience with them. Urban Drainage doesn't have a lot. the emergency manager in Arapahoe County has volunteered to help write those grants with us. And then the other option would be a stormwater fee increase, and how that actually is done, I guess, is kind of up to the council and finance. To raise the funds immediately, a bond could be issued backed by increase in the stormwater fee. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. Again, it's the floodplain affects people and property. It's a tough situation for the city and for the residents. Some of them don't even know that they're at risk. The funding sources for a $20 million project, we reviewed those. The local projects won't solve the problem, but they may help in the short term or with smaller storms. But I think we need to get started, move in with our public information. So would like from you to get confirmation from you on our approach and suggestions on any other topics that you may want us to look into.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councilmember Rolson?
Thank you for all this. So the next, thank you. I'm forgetting now. The next step is the public meeting, right?
Yes, that's what I would propose.
So how can we, what are all the avenues for us making sure that people find out? I'm sure we're going to send letters to each property that are in it.
A certified mailing would be about
that's
our best
even
approach.
Better. Yeah. And then do we have, Eric, do we have lists of those who've come in the past and the emails all these years, 2 years really, that we make, so we make sure they get targeted in a very special way?
We've actually reached out to those who had problems in the past and actually invited them this evening. I think one resident's here tonight, but yeah, we want to make sure that we do keep everybody informed. We have that list as well.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure we don't miss anybody in this.
Councilmember Valentine.
Linda actually covered it. So we'll get some feedback on this once you do the master plan, and I assume that they'll be asking questions about how it affects them, how it affects their insurance, how long it'll be. I'll get some more detailed information. When you said that you're going to send a certified mailing, how many households?
There were 256 properties, give or take, that are actually affected by the floodplain.
Councilmember Russell?
Sorry. Do we have any idea what it's going to cost the average homeowner for insurance under flood insurance?
No, I don't.
Is there a way to find that out to provide for them before we have the meeting?
Yes, absolutely. I can work through urban drainage and get in touch with a FEMA representative and look into what that will be.
Okay, and then the one other question that I have, where it talks about formulating plans to improve the problematic flooding areas, will that also be completed before the public meeting?
Some may, some might not. It depends. This public meeting is I would like to see it happen relatively quickly. There's the one project there on the inlet on Ogden that would like to get moved out, but there's others that are in Dartmouth and Downing neighborhood that we need to look a little harder at, and how it will match into the 100-year storm. It's probably not a good idea to go spend a lot of money on things that aren't going to fit into the master plan, or that won't be paid for, or aren't subject to repayment by urban drainage. Okay, and so then actually we are going to go ahead with a 100-year pipe. Yes, ma'am. Also. So, and how long will that take?
Well, I believe that the urban drainage representative is here said at least 10 years. Just to get the funding, urban drainage has X amount of dollars, and this would be a pretty big hit for the metro area. I would say 10 to 20 years is what I would think. Hopefully quicker, because it really doesn't function until the whole thing is done. You know, we can build a pipe, but if we don't have the inlets to get the water in it, it doesn't do anything. But I think realistically, I'm going to say 10 years.
Okay, so the homeowners, if it's designated as a floodplain, will potentially, as soon as it's completed, it's no longer considered a floodplain, correct? Or
That's correct, yeah. They'll be out of the floodplain completely.
Okay, so for their benefit, the sooner it gets done, the better.
Absolutely. You know, the process that Paul talked about, just getting through urban drainage, is a couple of years before, if we decide to go to FEMA, it'll be 2 years before the mapping is done. And until FEMA designates it as a floodplain, if we elect to go that way, we couldn't get their funding. So that's one of the pros of designating as a FEMA-regulated floodplain rather than just local control. There's additional funding. Urban drainage will spend or contribute 50% either way. The federal government, I'm not sure how we would do that. As Paul mentioned, they're competitive, but I'm sure we could probably apply for millions of dollars of funding through them if it's FEMA.
Okay, thank you.
Back to Councilmember Barrington.
Since she brought up that question, as you're fixing it. The microphone can't hear you at all.
Thanks.
Is that better? No, I won't sing. So as you were talking, okay, that's a bit much. As you were talking about it being completed over the 10 years, does that put us at any risk? Obviously, once you complete a section of pipe, that area is safe, but then the pipe is letting water out for 10 years at different locations. Does that cause us any problem or liability as we're moving along with it? Because then all of a sudden there's this flow of water that wasn't here, and now it's all coming out at another place that still hasn't been done yet. Is there any problem with that?
First off, we can't let that happen. That's why we have to start at the outfall end, and actually Denver really needs to do their work on the north side of Yale. And we have to work this thing backwards. That's the only way it works. But even those sections that we do at the beginning of the project, if we did say the first third of it, it still doesn't protect all the flooding because the water that's coming in from University is not getting into the pipe. And so it doesn't function until the whole thing's done. Yeah, it can make some areas better, but I don't believe it will be able to remove anybody from the floodplain until it's completely done. I could be wrong on that, but that's my thought. Yeah.
As portions of the pipe are completed and accepted, there may be some incremental areas that can be taken out of the flood hazard area delineation. But as you can see, the process with FEMA is pretty long and drawn out, so it might take a while.
I'm not worried about them coming out of the floodplain as much as us creating a worse water problem during this while we're building it for the sections that aren't done yet. And so just
that would certainly be a concern and a consideration during the design process, is to make sure that's being taken care of.
All right. And then back to my original question. Originally, when we were talking about some ideas and funding and what's going on, and you're talking about 300 homes around this area, and then some solutions that might include everybody contributing in the city, and quite honestly, brought that up to in a couple of my district coffees and to a couple of people, and gotta love people in District 3, all in it. All in it together. And the comments that I heard back from that was that it might be us next time doing something or needing something. And so there wasn't really a lot of pushback as I thought there might be from going, what is that? I love saying that lately. Not my monkey, not my circus, not my problem. And they really weren't like that. And that's one of the reasons probably I moved here, because I love the people here. So I would really like to see a schedule of what that would look like if we did do something that was on the stormwater or something like that, what that would look like to try and start to either build that up, what that kind of cost would look like, what that kind of rate increase would be, so that we can see whether that is feasible. Maybe it'll be so much they'll not turn nice anymore. I don't know. But so far, the kind of community feel to this, I'm kind of surprised, considering it is a small small group of people, but I think I was just surprised. So without that pushback, I really would like to have the information so that we can really start talking real numbers about what kind of commitment that would take and see whether that goes down as well.
Well, we'll get with finance and their expertise because we don't have it, but we'll get with them about how much it needs to raise to pay off bonds over a certain amount of years. We'll get back with you.
Or to even start to put that money in. So, yeah, just I'd appreciate it. I'd appreciate it.
I agree. I think some information regarding the financing and how it works with the timeline would be helpful. You mentioned the, bond possibility, almost like it, do you envision a possibility with no bond required where a storm fee increase could be implemented and that money's, saved for capital as it's needed to build it out over time? Or would that be a major delay in building this thing out?
We haven't run the calculations. I just feel that's going to be too much money for the average homeowner to be able to afford.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. What do we have? Maybe 12,000 households and $10 million, and I can't do the math, but it's a lot.
Yeah, over 10 years, probably something. That might be helpful to understand what that kind of looks like and how that might impact timelines and things like that, because I think that'll be helpful for us to understand and be able to discuss with the public. Councilmember Barondine.
Littleton amassed $28 million in 10 years just by raising different rates on their sewer thing. They still have not provided me with the formula of how they did that, but that's what they claim they did. So apparently a little penny, compounded interest, something, you never know. I mean, but the sooner we get that started and have those kind of things going on and at least know what we're doing, that would be it.
Further comments or questions from council? Councilmember Olson?
I do have one. It's kind of a strange one. How accurate are the maps? I mean, per house, like when there's a line that says this house is in, this house is out. Should the ones next to the line who aren't in also be invited to this meeting, or is it making it more difficult?
Certainly, we can increase the area of those that are affected. Now, whether the accuracy of the map, it's based on 1 foot aerial photography contours. Mm-hmm. So there probably is a little bit of variance there. But again, the line is the line, and if it hits your property, you're on the list.
Right. I guess I'd rather go bigger than smaller and have maybe we're going to be building goodwill for those who are next to it thinking, yes, let's figure this out.
Yeah.
But
last time in the public meeting that we had with Urban Drainage to introduce this program, I think we went 300 feet beyond.
Oh, great. Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from council? Any further direction you feel like you need from us at this time?
No, we'll let you know when the public meetings can be scheduled. And then the big decision that the council will have to make eventually as a policy is whether we submit to FEMA or not. Now, Urban Drainage hasn't put us under the gun, and they said when they need this, but, I can't imagine it'll be much beyond spring when they're going to want to know which way we want to go.
And I would think that we would be getting some feedback on that through this public meetings process as well. I know that we studied that a little bit. The previous council did at least a little bit. Might be helpful to get some of that information in front of this council for a more meaningful conversation on that at our next meeting.
Okay, we'll provide that in advance.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 3, that is discussion of Title VII sex offender residency requirements. Our acting city attorney, Dugan Comer, is present to discuss sex offender registry requirements. Good evening.
Good evening, Council. So before you tonight is I put this together, memorandum together for Council to give you some ideas perhaps of where you would like to see this ordinance go. It's really a discussion point for this council. It's a policy decision by the council as to how you wish to proceed or how you want my office to move forward with either amending or repealing this ordinance.
Thank you. open up for comment or questions from council. Councilmember Barentine.
What got redacted at the top?
That's my initials.
Okay. Just look
I don't know.
very secret. I just
More like a
wanted-
signature redaction, I think.
Yeah.
I go, it was a very tiny redaction, but I go,
Right.
I want to know
Here.
what you don't want me. No, I'm sorry. I was just curious.
No, it's okay.
Our new program redacts people's signatures so that they can't be pirated electronically. It just, a way iCompass works.
Oh, okay. That's good. That's good.
It used to be
I think
done
it's
by
good
hand
practice.
otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose since I still have the floor. I guess I'll wait.
Comments or questions from council? Councilmember Yates.
Actually, I was kind of hoping that we had some more information to work off of. I know a couple of council members met with individuals on the 7th, and I'm wondering if they would share that information with the rest of council.
I don't know the details of what you're asking about or who. If anybody can fill me in, I would appreciate that.
You want to disclose everything? Okay.
Use your discretion here. I don't know what we're talking about.
I
So.
don't know. It is on every issue. I certainly go ahead and do my homework and talk to people as much as possible. I have talked to and gotten information from the parole board. I have gotten information and read articles from the Sex Offender Management Registry Board. I have talked to the people who handle the Archdiocese Sex Offender Registry and how they do their management for the sexual offenders who have to do a sacrament, and because they have a legal right to that. I've also talked to the case manager. I've talked to, and then of course read several articles. I did try to contact Wetterling, I believe is her name, and she was the person who originally did was instrumental in doing the sex offender registry, because there was an article that there was information that came to me that there was she was not in favor of residency restrictions. I keep mixing up the word residency and registry. So she's not for residency restrictions, and I guess the initial intent of that implementation, and she was in the news recently because they just found her son's body, or his remains.
Councilmember Barentine, sounds like you've done a lot of due diligence on this issue. You know, I think the member.
Well, there's
was asking,
more. Are you
is there a
sure? You don't want to hear the
particular-
rest of what I did?
Was there a particular meeting on the 7th that you feel like might be helpful for the body to understand any feedback or information that was received? I think was the question.
I didn't know anybody was keeping my calendar, but I can look and see who I was talking to on the 7th.
Okay.
Is there of some particular interest, Mr. Yates, on who I was talking to on the 7th?
Well, Susan
Maybe
Walker,
you'll...
Susan Walker said that she provided you some information to bring to council, and since it wasn't in the packet, I'm just, do you have that information that you could share with us? That's all I'm asking for.
Oh, well, be direct. It makes it quicker. Let me see. She gave me some articles, I believe, of some of the ones that I read. I don't think there was enough for everybody on council, and I don't think that was the intention, that I was going to be some kind of distribution center for council. Oh, here they are. I think these are some of them. So if somebody would like to make some, see, and this is Miss Wetterling. These are some of them. This is from somebody else. Do you only want the ones that... Here. I believe that... oh, she's here. So, did you give me 3, 4, 5? How many articles did you give me? 6, yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Maybe I only have... I have 4.
Sounds like there were a couple articles,
4.
Contributed that may be distributed to the council if we feel like that's appropriate. Councilmember Barentine.
Of course I do. I mean, I was concerned because there was, we need to have as current information as possible. And, but I have information from other people as well. I mean, we have information that was provided by the Sex Offender Management Board and the parole officer, as well as the parole officer who was involved in the 2006. So,
I guess I would ask counsel if they would like that. I would say that there's no probably shortage of secondary sources on this type of an issue. You know, if you Google this or type, there's going to be a lot of information and articles written on this topic.
and I'm sure other council people have certainly gone ahead and researched and talked to people and done work on this, because this is a very important issue that affects over 100 families in this community, that affects our standing in the state, that affects our spending taxpayer money on a lawsuit. So I'm sure that everybody's gone ahead and done other things. So certainly as you go along, I'd love to have you share what all you've done to go ahead and make yourself more informed on this issue as well.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councilmember Martinez and then back to Councilmember Yates.
Yeah, I think the more information we have, the better to prepare us for these discussions. And I was surprised to see that in our packet we didn't have a collection of all of that information that has been brought forth to us. So I don't know if we can get that kind of retroactively. And I would also be curious to see for our city kind of the stats on these type of offenses in our city prior to the ordinance being enacted, and then since 2006, just for, you know, information's sake, to see if we see any difference or not.
You're asking for sex offense crimes
in Inglewood.
Pre-2000.
Yeah, pre-2006, and then since the ordinance was enacted, just so we can get an idea.
Well, could I just clarify what, I mean, since the ordinance itself is claiming that a residency restriction is what makes it safer, then it would be the people who are on the registry, not just sex offenses, because it would have to be people who are identified and put on the registry. Otherwise, you don't know.
Right.
Right.
Well, my guess is we probably have arrest data that, you know, doesn't necessarily
we had
track
a period
by
of time where we weren't enforcing it, so that kind of
I would just be curious to see
the whole time would be good, though.
Mr. Comer, do you think you could provide some information? No, ma'am, I apologize. This is not an opportunity for public
she
comment.
said into the mics.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
yes.
Sorry.
She said into the mic.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't hear you apparently from over there. So we will try to speak up a little bit, ma'am.
The information that has been provided by those who have been speaking with regard to this issue, I believe it's all been given to council at some point in time. I believe I have most copies of it. I can certainly put that together and provide it to council if they wish. With regard to the stats of offenses prior to 2006 and since 2006, I'd have to get together with the police department.
Like I said, I'm sure there's some arrest data, but I'm not so sure how it will be delineated, how that data will be delineated. So I would suggest that anything you have, you know, readily available, provide, and you know, don't go out and have to feel like you need to make up new stats at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I'll just a simple number from the department, I think, would be what I'd be looking at.
Thank you. Let's go to Councilmember Yates.
Well, this evening we have a couple of folks here that deals with this issue. If council wants to ask them any questions, this might be the opportunity to do so, because in the chambers we really don't have a good discussion back and forth. And it might be an opportune time for council members here to kind of discuss what their concerns are. So as we move forward, we can either address them with necessary data or, you know, whatever need be, but we need to have some sort of a real meaningful conversation about this before we make a decision.
You know, I would say that I think that meaningful conversation really needs to happen between council. You know, I'd be open to bring in whoever we thought, you know, would be helpful on this. I worry about, you know, litigants in, you know, those type of issues being questioned in this type of a format without our counsel being present. And so, you know, I think if we found some third-party experts or whoever that we wanted to invite, I'd be totally for that. But, you know, again, with some litigants, I'm not sure that's a great idea.
Oh, fair enough. But
the other comment, I guess, would finally just be that, you know, we need to find a policy that works. And obviously there's individual cases that affect that policy, but, you know, we need to have kind of as broad a scope conversation, I think, as possible and avoid individual cases as much as it, makes sense for that discussion.
Oh, I would agree with that part of it. Our look at it should be a for the lack of a better term, a global type view on the issue. Because when we start getting into individuals, then it's easy to start looking at specific situations that may or may not pertain to the issue.
Are there any particular questions or information types that might be helpful, or bodies that you'd like to hear from, perhaps, that we could start to get a list of?
Well, I don't know of any specific groups or individuals that I would say is better than another. But here's the questions that's going through my head, and that is, how does our ordinance affect the ability to keep these folks on the straight and narrow, or does it? Also, when we're talking about people who have committed any kind of a crime, when is it that they've paid their dues to society? Because we need to start looking at the bigger issues here, not just Brian's issues or XYZ person's issue, but we need to look at the overall scope of this. Are we accomplishing what the previous council set out to do? Are we providing a safer environment for folks, or are we making it more dangerous because these people aren't as easily tracked? Now, they're going to come and go as they wish, with or without an ordinance. They will be in our city. So the question will be, are we doing it as a knee-jerk reaction? Or are we truly working in the best interest of the whole city and the individuals involved, their personal rights? I mean, those are some tough questions, and I need some good information and stats and stuff, so when a decision is made one way or another, I can say, this is why. Right now, it's pure emotion.
I think that's helpful to sort of help frame some of the questions that are looming in our minds to begin this conversation. I apologize. I can't remember if it was Councilmember Olson here or Councilmember
Doesn't matter. You can go.
Okay, thanks. And Councilmember Yates, I struggled with the same thing. I mean, you want to make this so that you're, again, it's either too much or too little. I apologize. And in order to do that is the more research you do, the more people that you talk to, the more that you understand both the victims that I've talked to and their concerns and victim groups and the very difficult job that's been tasked to people trying to make this process happen, which is pretty onerous process, as I've learned. And that's what takes the emotion out of it, is information and making the best decision and trying to understand why when that wave happened that we only ended up being one of 6 communities that ended up doing it, and to assume that the other communities in the state, the other 300 some odd or 400 some odd, are not keeping their population safe just isn't true. So I appreciate that concern. That's why I went on that's why I always try to make sure I get as much information as I possibly can. And I share Councilmember Martinez's concern that we brought this forward and something that we're trying to address in a timely manner here, and there wasn't anybody. We've got a plethora of people that have come forward concerned about this and how it affects their ability to do their job and, in their opinion, keep the community safe, not just this one. And that's all we did. I mean, we had people who begged us and said, if you need any information, we'll be available. And yet they're not prepared to sit at the table and have this conversation yet. So I appreciate Mayor Jefferson that we certainly wouldn't want to put anybody on the spot and just start quizzing them tonight when we didn't give them the courtesy of letting them know that we would do that. But I do think that a plethora of resources have been made available to us, and we should have taken advantage of it for tonight. Amy, I mean, Councilmember Martinez, I apologize, that we should have had, I think we should have had more information now. We've been discussing this for months, and I think that this ends up making this kind of futile because we're just trying to, it's just going to get moved on to discuss again. So to have some kind of in-depth thing on one of these three choices tonight, when obviously we need more information, is kind of difficult.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson?
Thank you. Well, I'll jump in the hot water a little bit. I would like to see a change for sure. I don't want to stay with status quo. But I'm very concerned. I've been hearing from people who don't understand what we're trying to figure out, and they haven't had the advantage of this. They haven't had the advantage of the meetings. And so while I would like to make some decisions tonight on this, I really want to respect all people and the fear that they have in some crazy ways about this issue. And without some data that we have public, this was never public. I mean, it's random. It's not in our packet. It's not for people to read tonight. So that's where I'm worried about us not having a very open and it's not a very open and transparent process when we haven't collected all the data that we would have even beyond this. There is so much out there, and it's not secondary. It's firsthand research that has been done with juried publications that are very well documented that we should be looking at with this, and we should be able to base our decisions on it and say, without a doubt, this is the way we want to move. I mean, it's not going to be that simple, but I do think that we ought to, for the public, be able to explain exactly. I think it's what Councilmember Yates was saying. And I don't mind being called Linda at all, folks, so please.
Oh, it changes all the time. Come on.
What? I don't want to be called little lady, young lady, or other things, but I would like to be called Linda or Councilmember Olson. That's fine. Anyway, I don't mind if you do that to me. So but I'd like to go on the record that I'd like to see some changes, and so I want to be maybe previewing to the public that, at least from my perspective, I want to see change. And so if you don't want change, you better come forward and start speaking about it now. So I don't know who's listening, but.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates?
Well, I think maybe we should, unfortunately, have another study session, but we need to invite some folks, people from the law enforcement end, victims groups or whatever, and advocates. And let's kind of cover the whole gambit and find out what truly does work, and give people the opportunity to speak and be asked questions of.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson?
I think it'd be really good to get some public policy people that are currently working on this, not just those who have retired too, although that's helpful because they don't have as much in the skin in the game. But I'd like to put some people who are having to work on this in the state right now, who are maybe currently involved. I'd like to see them too. So I think I could come up with a list of some people, but I didn't come prepared for that. I should have, because I was thinking about we need more for the public to know why we're moving in a direction or not.
No problem. I would suggest that, as we think about this moving forward, if we have particular organizations or groups that we would like to hear from, Councilmember Yates has provided some categories of things, and I'll work with the city manager's office to try to find some that represent some of those categories. But if you come across, organization types or specific entities or people that you would like to hear from, please pass those along to Mr. Keck, and we can see about some of those resources. Councilmember Valentine?
One of the concerns still remains that as we're discussing this, we've had anecdotal comments made at council, but we haven't gotten some definitive answer during the time that we're deliberating on this and deciding what we're going to do with this ordinance, on whether we're going to go ahead and pull the enforcement of the ordinance or not. There's been anecdotal things said that they're not enforcing it, but we need to be adults and be upfront about what we're doing or not doing, because my concern is that you still have a population of people that are believe they're being threatened to leave, and are probably in their better interest not to expose themselves or fight this fight. And then we've also heard that the police are not enforcing it, but there's been no actual policy. And I believe that policy needs to come from this council on what we're doing here.
Thank you. I got Councilmember Olson, then Councilmember Yates.
I think Steve was first.
Okay, Councilmember Yates.
Those particular subjects we talked about in executive session, and before I actually say those, I probably should get a little bit of counsel from our council.
If we discuss it at executive session, you shouldn't be discussing it right now. So
Okay.
That's my recommendation.
I was referring to Councilmember Yates's comment and the several of the people that came up to council. I wasn't disclosing anything that was said in executive session. Councilmember Yates at the last city council meeting said the police aren't enforcing it. Now, that's what I said when I said anecdotal comments are being made that the police are not enforcing it, because I doubt that Mr. Yates has control over the police, but he made that comment. And so people in the audience believe that a council member sitting up there saying that he knows something maybe they don't know. So we need to either come with a policy and make a decision so that people know what the heck's going on instead of gossip.
I guess I would ask Mr. Comer to weigh in on where we're at on enforcement currently.
My understanding, and I can definitely check on this tomorrow, is that the police are allowing those individuals who are currently living here to register their addresses, and that they are not accepting new registrations. That's my understanding, and I can confirm that tomorrow.
Please do, and I suppose council can weigh in if we want to try to adjust some policy there. Councilmember Yates, go back to you.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, are you done? Okay. Councilmember Olson.
So I do think we need to help give some direction for the city. This has gone on long enough, and if we had made some decisions by now, I think we could have just kept the way. Well, we'd know what we were doing, and we don't. And so I would entertain some kind of an adjustment until we get this figured out. I thank you for those who provided these, but these are secondary, tertiary. These are opinion pages. This is not what the public will love us to use. So I want to make sure that this isn't the only kind of information we get for our background on this. There has to be some first-hand research, real research that's juried, that has some kind of methodology that's clear to help, I think. And there is some. So I think we can find it easily. I just want to make sure that we don't go with opinion pages on this, as articulate as they might be.
I disagree with that. That's what this is, but it's just a small amount of what I had garnered. So
I think
this
we're in
was
agreement.
particularly asked for, but your kind of I'll accept that that's your overlook of it, hurried opinion, but the amount of professionals that have already come forward and offered to be part of here is what I already said should have probably been sitting here too. And I do agree with you that we're going to have to do something. And
Councilmember Russell.
I actually agree that we need to do something also. If that means entertaining perhaps a moratorium during the meeting tonight, I think that perhaps we should do something like that.
May I address that issue for a moment?
Please.
If you do a moratorium, that's fine. It'll take an ordinance, not a motion. So it'll take 2 readings. I'm just letting you know. And if you do a moratorium, then that allows new registrants to come in, which that may not be a factor. I'm just putting that out there for consideration.
Thank you.
But they would be registrants, right? They would be registering. Or how would we
As
do
per
that?
the state requirement.
Well, they'd be registering under state law, but we wouldn't have a residency requirement because you've got the whole ordinance on moratorium at that point. So they wouldn't have to necessarily, they'd come into the police department and register. But
Right. That's what I mean. They
Okay.
would
Yeah.
be known. They would be registered. We would know where they live.
Correct.
I
I'm
agree. Sorry that. Sorry, did you want?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'll conclude.
No, just to pony up on that. So it would be the same as when they didn't have when the same as while it was the court case was under Rawls, they still had to register. They just didn't have the residency restrictions. That wouldn't be any different. And the moratorium that was originally proposed would have only been on the grandfathering. I think if I don't know, Councilmember Russell would have to. I'm just going to stick with that Councilmember thing. No offense, Councilmember Olson, but just is easier for me. I don't know that she was talking about necessarily doing the whole ordinance or part of it. She'd have to clarify that. But I just wanted to clarify that if it is, as you were saying, the moratoriums that we have done in the past, I didn't know that they were done by ordinance.
Well, you've done moratoriums on things that haven't been an ordinance. For instance, when we did a moratorium on marijuana social clubs, you weren't allowing them in. Okay, you weren't going to accept them. But you now have an ordinance in place that you don't want to enforce, or you're asking that it not be enforced until this council can come to a decision as to how they want to proceed with it. So you do need an ordinance for that, because you are actually stopping the enforcement of an existing ordinance.
So like action for like.
Correct.
Okay, that would make sense. All right.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates?
Well, if we're wanting to find out what we think we should do for the time being, I would say currently for the folks who are already within our community, that we leave them alone until we as a council make a decision what direction we're going. I would be in the agreement that until we make that decision, in order to keep from making a situation potentially worse, that we don't accept any additional offenders until we make a decision one way or another. Because frankly, it wouldn't be fair to those folks if they moved into the community and we didn't change it. And if we do change it, well, all right, that's postponing the amount, when they can move into the community.
I concur with that, and what I heard from Mr. Comer was that that's currently the status quo, and we'll get a confirmation on that tomorrow.
Correct. In fact, I will send an email to Detective Cole this evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's the best route for now.
Agreed. Councilmember Barentine.
If that's what confirmation that you get from the police, well, if you get confirmation from the police that is what they're doing currently right now, and I guess council seems to be okay with that, if that's the case, will there be a notification to the people that are on that registry in that situation so that they know that that's the case?
I would, excuse me, I would think so, and I can certainly ask them to do that.
All right.
And if I get that confirmation, I will send out an email to all council members.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess to wrap up, I'll say that I too am looking for some change in policy here. I'm hearing some consensus surrounding wanting to continue this conversation regarding looking at some policy changes. Candidly, I'm biting my tongue here a little bit on, my feelings on some of the policy given the litigation issues, and I'll probably save some of those comments for our next conversation when, other members are also doing the same. But I'll just leave my comments at that, I do want to see some change. And I guess I just worry about the ongoing litigation, knowing that we want some change, that, those are somewhat contradictory, and I worry about us as a body sort of resolving that as soon as possible. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll work tomorrow to get this scheduled as soon as possible. I believe today is our last study session on a meeting night. So, we may have to evaluate the schedule tomorrow and kind of make a recommendation about that. One of the alternatives we talked about was, hey, maybe we need to reinstate study sessions if we feel like we're not getting there. We'll take a look at it tomorrow and get back with council on where we feel like the scheduling looks like. Questions or comments on that? Got a little bit of time here. Do you want to do choice now? You got anything on choice? Councilmember Olson, did you have something else?
I was going to save it for in there because usually we don't. I would like to follow up on just what you said. So I don't know how your mayor-manager meeting is going. I don't want to be critical at all, but tonight, I think I want to give some feedback, and I hope it's helpful. I would hope that in your meetings you would ask staff, what are you going to present during this time, and do some due diligence of asking yourselves, what will council want? And maybe this hasn't been needed before because it's not been so difficult, but this is a tough one. So if you could ask yourselves during those meetings, and I don't listen to your meetings, so I trust what you're doing, but I want to give some feedback that if you are asking that question, I think we could have uncovered that council probably would want more than this. So if you could just add that in, that would be great.
We have that discussion every time, ma'am.
This is what you got.
Item. I'm sorry?
And this is what you got. And you said you wanted more research background to it?
I suggested that, again, I don't know the exact conversation, but, we need some information for council on alternatives, on best practices, on neighboring municipalities. It seemed like a fairly comprehensive. I, too, am a little bit disappointed with the amount of information that came forward. Yeah. I do my due diligence on the front end, just like you suggested. And if you listen to the audio of the meetings, you'll see that.
I will go back and listen to that. I'm not trying to be critical of you. I'm really not. I'm just saying sometimes you just have to ask a few more questions, and maybe it would come up that, you know what, we got to make sure that research that was presented on a Monday night, that's in a current public place so everyone gets to see it, not just us because we were there Monday night, that kind of thing. That's all I'm asking.
And there's no doubt that could be flushed out further, I think. I think we can agree that, we can flush that out a little further going forward. Please, go ahead, Councilmember Brandon.
I did listen to the meeting, and I think that it started and it kind of got a little waylaid, but your point is well taken that maybe just to kind of slow that meeting down a little bit and kind of go back to that, because I think once you started talking about the issue with Acting City Attorney Comer, that you kind of lost that, like you originally asked for it, and then if you circle back around, so just kind of keep that note in your mind about how this is going to look that night. But I think you started that, and her point is well taken that these would then just be a little bit more productive, and you did start there, and then everybody's trying to get their stuff in and do their thing, so just crack the whip on these guys a little bit more and bring them back to your side of it. But the point is well taken, because it would have been a little bit more productive tonight to move this along in a more timely manner. So, but I appreciate the work.
No, fair enough. Point
Joe.
Taken. Again, this is a bit of a team sport, and so I'll ask for some support from our city manager and our city attorney to try to evaluate what we think is going to be questions asked and try to provide as much information as we think to make this as productive as possible. You want to do manager choice?
I can, sir.
I had a council choice.
Do you want to do
You want to do council choice? I was just.
Oh, I thought you were doing.
I was thinking let's do manager and at least manager choice. I didn't think that was okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. We've got time for both. We've probably got time for both. Why don't you go ahead?
I wanted to let you know that they had filmed a scene from a movie at the Paradox. It's a pretty low-budget movie, but it was filmed at the Paradox, and it was very fun. And Dave Black, who's the owner of the Paradox, who also owns that building in the 3400 block of Broadway there, is also on the city council for Sheridan. I don't think that had anything to do with them picking his bar for the kind of quasi-mafia movie that they were doing, but I did stop by there, and they filmed 2 scenes, and one of the things that actually helped for the movie scene was that they were doing construction in the back, and apparently the guy comes in and he goes, I already own all the block here, and you better sell your bar to me. So it would kind of fit into the whole thing of it, and that it needed to be like that. And he actually had a couple of lines, so I was...
no cameo
Joseph
for you,
and I
though?
weren't able to stay and watch him say his lines. We helped him practice a little bit, then we had to go home. So, but it was pretty exciting, and I think that's pretty cool. So I wanted to give him a shout-out and let you guys know that. That's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Russell, did you have anything for member comment at this time? Member choice at this time? Thank you. Councilmember Yates, did you have anything for member choice? Councilmember Martinez?
I attended the MOA's art opening this weekend, and it was very well attended. There was tons of people. It was great. So if you get a chance, stop and see the show. And then I also attended the free showing of Opera Colorado's performance provided by the Cultural Arts Commission on Sunday, and it was well attended also. Wasn't as packed as the last performance. The last performance was standing room only. Well, in the back, we had to stand up, but I think it was partially due to the weather, probably, because it was really nice on Sunday. But lots of folks came and really enjoyed it. So.
Thank you for representing us strongly there. I apologize. I was trying to make the MOA event. I did not. Did Mr. Robinson make that event? I did not. Oh, no. Okay. Oh, no. We were trying to get some FaceTime over there and get to more of their events moving forward, though. So thank you for representing us there. Really appreciate that. Councilmember Olson, do you have anything else to add on your choice?
Sure. Just what I told you earlier is if it goes kind of late tonight, I'm going to step out just because my daughter's flying out tomorrow morning. So I just don't want you to think I'm rude. I'm just going to politely get up. If we go until like 9:30, 10-ish, I'm going to get up and leave. So I'm not trying to be rude. I'm coming for as much as I can tonight.
We will not be offended and try to understand. Mr. Keck?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, the item that was on the agenda for tonight to discuss with Council is obviously November 14th. You're having the facilitated retreat with Mr. Greg Pyburn of Leaders Edge, and the location had not been selected. As we looked at the city's charter, it's very clear that the council has to meet within the corporate boundaries of the community. So we were going to suggest the golf course because they have a nice training room there that's off-site. However, as you recall, the golf course is actually in the city of Sheridan, so that would be a violation of the charter. So as such, we want to make sure that we put forth a couple of other alternatives to you. Obviously, one of the ones that obviously is available, and I actually booked it just in case you wanted it, would be the Malley Center. The Malley Center has a room in which you could meet, and staff will be there and available to close it down as you're done. But that's just one example of location. So if you want to meet in this building, you certainly can do that as well to continue with that. But I think Mr. Pyburn made it clear to me as I spoke to him last week that it's good to get you out of your natural environment so that you can feel like you're in a different place and focusing on what needs to be focused upon. So that's kind of the logic that I followed with selecting the Malley Center.
That's my feeling as well. Do members want to weigh in on the appropriateness of the Malley Center or other venues that they would like to see considered?
I'm fine with the Malley Center. We had a meeting there last week for Parks and Recreation. It was a little chilly, so just make sure you
bring your
the
sweater.
short hair is making me cold on my neck.
I like the haircut, though. It looks good.
My only complaint, their chairs are hard.
We'll get done quicker.
They actually have a room that has couches and sofas.
Oh, maybe that's our room. We can lounge about and relax the atmosphere a little.
Not a bad idea.
Yeah. Sounds like some general consensus
That's
around
fine.
the Malley Center. Thank you.
Bathroom early?
Anything from you, Mr. Comer, that we can attack from your report at this time?
You just watched me
How
finish
slow
that
he
pop.
wants to
That's
go.
not fair.
I'm working on a new commission, Historic Preservation Commission board.
I think you need the mic.
I'm working on a new Historic Commission board language. So I'll be bringing that to a study session at some point in the future.
Thank you. Saw something come forward from Mr. Cohn regarding, some suggestions as well. So
That was in Title 16, so I can talk with Doug about that.
great. Okay, we're adjourned. We got a little bit of an extended bathroom break before we pick this up at 7:30 next door.
You just don't lock this room, right?
What's that?
Just don't lock the room. We're going to leave my stuff.
That's an idea.
Yeah.